Welcome to the shop. Today we're talking about landing approaches. Landings are one of the most difficult parts of this hobby to master. And I don't think anyone can do 100% of their landings perfect every time. You just can't. But it's something to strive for, because I do think that many planes are damaged during landing. I've done so many landing videos. But on this one, it's going to be slightly different, because all I'm talking about is one facet of that landing, and that's the approach. If you have a good approach, you're going to have a good landing. And it absolutely is true. It's so simple to me that when somebody's all out of whack on their approach and they're fighting and struggling to bring it in and they force it and some kind of damage happens. So getting that nice approach takes practice. And, show an example of, Reed, a 13-year-old boy, who all he does is practice his landings, and he will burn up a battery. He's 13 years old, and he has purposeful practice where he is focused on one aspect of this hobby, and he continues to practice. And I implore you to do the same kind of thing, is practice certain aspects of the things that you're struggling with. If you practice what you're not very good at, you'll start getting better at it. Simple, right? But yet we don't do that. 13-year-old kids or adults, sometimes we struggle with those types of things. Anyway, so in this video, I go through my approach. And I do a shallow approach on my landings. I know some people have made comments that, no, you need to come in at a steeper angle and flare perfectly. Well, since I'm not in the cockpit, that flaring part is a split-second perfection. And I see it time and time again where people come in at a steep angle and they try to get that flare just right. And they hit that nose wheel or they just pancake that plane down. I like a shallow approach because then I have a little bit more time to just nail that landing and make it smooth as possible. So and that's how I do it. If you do it a different way, make your video to show that. That's great. But this is how I do it. And I'll show examples of that, in the video. So anyway, if you like this kind of content, hit that like button. If you have any questions, leave a comment. Love it. Thanks a lot. Have a good one. Let's talk about making an approach. What I like to do is look down the runway. Where am I lining up on? So if I make my approach right that way, I'm going to line up on my runway. If I need to make an approach from this side, I'm going to line up like that, like so. Now, it's not going to be perfect because you're not standing on the runway when you're landing. But it is something to think about as far as where you're playing and where you're making your base to final turns. I make mine by that tree right there. Right after that tree, I'm coming in. Yes, I'm gonna have to use a little rudder. Over here, usually make it right after that little spot over between those two trees. A little after that is when I come in on that one. Problem is for us, we got that gigantic ball of fire looking at us, and it makes approaches from that direction very tricky. So a couple things we got to do differently. Okay, we're gonna go over landing approaches. Good approach makes for a good landing. But what does that really mean? For me, and everybody's got a different way of doing this. For me, I like more of a low, shallow approach versus higher and kind of dive bombing down and then pulling up at the last split second. So let's get the plane up in the air and I'll kind of narrate through what I'm talking about. So for me, my normal approach, as I showed, I look down the runway and I kind of have a couple points of reference. So for me, I'm going to make my turn right after that shelter, and I want to be under this tree right there. So I'm a little high right now, which means I'm going to carry some speed. I'm going to chop throttle and carry some speed. Also, got to be honest here, the wind is, I'm landing in the wrong direction of the wind, mainly because the sun is on there, and you guys won't be able to see anything if I film it that way. So I got to film landing the wrong way. But anyway, the approach is still the same. So come over here, I have my reference of that shed right there, and then I like to be between that tree and the fence and make my approach. Make any fine adjustments. Coming in a little hot.
And this is all about making that good approach.
Time remaining 5 minutes.
Another thing I would recommend as you're doing these approaches, don't land. Just do a flyby. I talk about that in one of my landing drills. And I think it's important to have that consistent approach, but you don't need to necessarily land. Here we go. We're coming in, and I like the lineup. I'm coming in kind of high, and I'm going to just do a flyby. The whole point of this battery, and I recommend you do this, take one battery and just work on your approaches. Where are you going to start making your turn? For me, it's right there, and I want to be under that big tree right there and between the fence. I was a little late on that. They're not all perfect. That's why you're practicing. This is a hard hobby and a hard skill to get really good at and consistent at. You know, I've talked about there's a young man that flies out here, Reed. He's 13 years old, and he will practice landings nonstop. And he's good at landing. Why? Because he practices his approaches and landing. He'll do touch and goes with an entire battery.
I'm not sure what the deal is with some folks that complain that they can't land well, but yet they don't practice. They take off, they fly, they land. Crappy landing, and then they complain. They don't do touch and goes. Not sure why.
So work on your approaches. A good, clean approach. Now here's an approach that I see a lot of people do. And then they struggle with it on landing and getting lined up with the runway. They'll come over here and they'll make their turn, and they make it a little too tight, and now they're coming right in this way. You can tell you're gonna have to do a little rudder work here. You can do it, make it short, but you're not setting yourself up for success. If you're an experienced pilot, obviously you don't really need these skills because you probably are doing this all the time. You can make those landings even when you're coming in short, make them look good. But a newer pilot, and you're struggling with your landings and lining up, find a spot that you need to make your turn on. Right there is where you line up, and then start bringing it in. Then work on modulating that throttle and getting that nose up. For this plane, nose needs to be up on these tricycle gears. Really, all of them should be more of a nose up attitude. Okay. All right, last one here. Line up good. The wind is not in my favor, and it's just getting worse. All right, here we go. Little speed. Now let's do one more. I didn't like that one.
I definitely like to end on a good note. I like to have that last landing on my practice session really good. And so I might do a couple flybys till I get it just right.
Starting to get bouncy up there. And again, the wind is not in the right direction. That's all we can do today.
Time remaining 2 minutes.
All right, bring her in, drop in. Keeping some speed because the way the wind is. And we're down. All right. Hope you got something out of this video. If you have any questions, leave a comment. If you like this kind of stuff, hit that like button. I appreciate it. And yeah, have a good one.